So I can just roll straight out of bed. Wow, that was cool, rolling straight out of bed. Got my brekkie here, just have some of that, it's nice. Just rolling out of bed, having breakfast. But you know, in the Cushing household, the first thing I like to do, by the way, I don't usually wear those to sleep. First thing I like to do is to make the coffee. This is just a little tip of mine. Some of you know that I'm mad about coffee. You just need a cheap bag of coffee beans. This is a Lavazza. It's actually quite cheap from Tesco's or Sainsbury's. Anyway, it's all about the grind. Don't bother wasting money on expensive coffee. Just get the beans. Beans in the grinder. Grind for a second or two. A few seconds. But then it's the freshness of the smell. Oh, that's amazing. Anyway, we've got an action-packed morning for you this morning. Loads in store. We're going to be shooting over to the Onslow in a second. Rob's going to give his commiserations that we can't be with him there in person. We will meet again. But before then, the Cushing lads, and I'm sure you at home, you love to start the day by getting your groove on. Joshy?
Good morning, chaps. Sorry we all can't be having breakfast at the Onslow Arms for your gentleman's breakfast this weekend. But I'm joining you in the afternoon on, what were you doing, Thursday, probably day 89 or something like that of lockdown. And yeah, we've got some great additions to the Onslow, including these two boys right here. Still waiting to name them, so any ideas, give us a shout. But yeah, I hope you all enjoy your breakfast. Hope you're all staying safe in these uncertain times. Hope you're liking the beard. Let me know whether it should stay or go. Going for the Tom Hanks Castaway look. So yeah, enjoy your breakfast and see you soon. Take care.
Well, it's great to see Rob over there, and can't wait to be back in the Onslow when we resume normality. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be without breakfast this morning. It's just you're going to have to cook it yourself. And we've got our very own Marco Vertesi, who's going to be teaching us a new fry-up with an Italian twist. He's going to be using a little bit of Parmigiano, an Italian flair. So over to Marco in a second. But before then, we're going to say grace. Bit weird because you're all having breakfast in your own time and so on. But anyway, Joshy is going to teach us a cool little grace. Joshy.
God is great, God is good. Thank you for our lovely food, amen.
Amen.
Yeah. Good morning, gentlemen without the ladies. Greg got in touch with me to ask me if I could do a similar thing to Liza's for the ladies' breakfast, and then she did an amazing shashuka, which I love as well. Greg put me on the spot a bit because he asked if I could do an Italian breakfast. Well, as most of us know, Italian breakfast is a cappuccino and a croissant. So I don't think that's worth doing. So I had a think, and I suddenly remembered this recipe that my old mum used to do for us every now and then. So don't get too excited. This isn't going to be amazing, and I think you're going to possibly be overwhelmingly disappointed with this because it's not very hearty. So the likes of big strapping blokes like Rev Greg is going to be very disappointed. But make this for your ladies because they'll really like this. Very simple, really simple. You're going to be a bit disappointed. So anyway, get a bit of a pan going on here. Olive oil, not extra virgin because it burns too quickly. So a bit of olive oil. And all we're going to do is fry some eggs. Fry some eggs in here. What we need is some amazing rustic bread, which of course is made by the amazing Di, who is our cameraman today. That's amazing, beautiful bread, doesn't get any better than that. So, as we can see, things are going quite well here. We all know what a fried egg looks like. I'm just going to put a little bit of salt on, just a tiny bit, because the cheese I'm going to put on top is going to make it quite salty. So the next thing, Di, over here, what we're going to do is get some parmigiano, and we're just going to do some nice long thin slices of parmesan. I mean, these are all things that you'll have, and as I said, it's not going to be earth-shattering, this recipe, but it's probably ingredients that you've never thought of putting together. And then the one that is going to really make it taste Italiano is the oregano. So a bit of oregano, little bit. That's all you need. How boring is that? Trust me, try it though, it's really good. We'll wait for it to finish and then you'll see. But it really is very simple. You've got all the ingredients and that's all there is to it really. Maybe we might have to edit this bit out and sort of get together, but carry on, keep going. May as well see how it goes. So yeah, use olive oil, don't use corn oil or vegetable oil because you want to get that Mediterranean flavour going through everything. There we go. Italian fried eggs with some nice artisan toast. Not fantastic, not mind-blowing, but just try it. It's really nice. Thank you all.
Well, it's great to see Marco in action there, and I hope you enjoyed the outtakes as well. I must say it's liberating to be filming in pyjamas. Won't tell you how many of the Sunday services had a clerical shirt on top and then pyjama bottoms down below, but we won't go there. Anyway, for our guest speaker this week, I've invited one of my really good friends, John Aldis. We met at Theological College and he'll explain more about that. But anyway, I thought he'd be really, really good to speak on the topic of serving God in every area of life, whatever career path you choose. And sometimes people have the misconception that it's ministers, it's the vicars, who are the really holy ones and they've given everything to God and God's especially pleased about them. That's not true. God cares about every area of life and you can serve God with any career path. John's a great person to speak on this topic because, as I said, he was in ministry, did a curacy, and then has dropped out of ordained ministry, full-time, paid ministry as a vicar, to pursue this career path of being a barrister. And yet, I know, because I delight in his life, he serves God with every breath that he has in his career path. So a great person to speak on this topic. Over to John. And I have to say, I know he's put a few pictures of me in his talk. They were my younger years, okay? Anyway, over to John.
Hi, I'm John Aldis. I live in Worcester with my wife Rachel and my daughter Felicity. Greg and I both studied at Ridley Hall. We lived in a house together in our final year with two other ordinands. It was a fun time. Greg spent most of his time playing rugby and going to the gym. I spent most of my time studying Hebrew and German metaphysics. I'm a barrister specialising in property, probate, insolvency and commercial disputes. Well, let me back up a little. I originally studied law at Oxford, where coincidentally I met Ellie's sister Nicola, and the plan was to become a barrister. But while I was there, I was inspired to go into church ministry by the curate at St Ebb's Church. He was a former barrister, and he said it's grim at the bar, and his philosophy of life was evangelism is a matter of eternal life and death. So if you have the gifts to be an evangelist, that should be your first choice of vocation. I heard that call and responded. I decided that I would prepare myself to go out to West Africa to teach in a theological college. Being a missionary wasn't new to me because my father was a missionary doctor in Niger, and I spent the first 11 years of my life growing up just south of the Sahara Desert. The first stage was to learn French. So after university, I spent 2 years working in Paris, organising Bible studies and holidays for Parisian students. And that's where I met Ellie, actually. We were camp leaders on a bilingual Christian summer camp in France called Interaction. The next stage was to get some theological training. So after Paris, I worked for a church in Oxford with international students. And during that time, I went through the selection process for the Church of England, and I was selected to be a theological educator. I chose to go to Ridley, where I met Greg. After 3 years at Ridley, I had a BA and an MPhil in theology. Everything was going to plan. But in reality, not all was well. The initial call to ministry that I felt in Oxford had filled up my spiritual tank and set me off on this journey. But it seemed like the filling stations along the way were few and far between. The rational, philosophical French had given me a new skepticism about faith. Theological study had challenged many of my certainties. Reading the Old Testament in Hebrew had made many passages feel alien and uncomfortable. Not only was I running on empty, but I felt like I had taken the car apart and was struggling to put it back together again. But I'd started, so I couldn't stop, could I? After Ridley, I served my curacy in St Nicholas Church, Newbury. In some ways, this was the climax of my spiritual life. In terms of preaching, something clicked, and people often told me how much they enjoyed my sermons. I loved the young people in the youth group. I enjoyed leading weddings and funerals. And yet, I struggled to pray. My faith felt abstract and uncertain compared to the concrete realities of life. I felt separated from my friends who worked normal hours while I was working weekends, evenings, Christmas and Easter. I also had a wife and daughter now, which made a gung-ho life as a missionary seem far less inviting. And I worried that if I kept going, I would eventually end up as a jaded 60-year-old parish priest who simply turns up to read out common worship services without any conviction. It was decision time. At the end of my curacy, I left the ministry and retrained as a barrister. Barristers' immediate clients are solicitors. Solicitors will generally instruct a barrister to do one of three things: advising, drafting, or advocacy. Sometimes I'm asked to advise on a point of law or procedure, or on the prospects of success of a claim before it's issued. Other times I'm instructed to draft the formal statement of case needed to issue or defend a claim. However, often I've had nothing to do with a case until I receive a bundle of papers from my solicitor asking me to represent his or her lay client in court. Like most barristers, I'm a self-employed practitioner operating out of chambers, St Philip's in my case. Despite the camaraderie of being in chambers, life at the commercial bar is relatively solitary. If I'm in court, I generally spend a large part of the day travelling on trains to get there. And if I'm not in court, I tend to work at home, in the garden if the weather is pleasant. I can access all my papers, cases, and practitioners' texts electronically. Of course, during the lockdown, I'm at home all the time. Some court hearings are taking place by telephone or video link, but most trials have simply been adjourned, so I've taken a 60 to 70% hit in my billings. Law must be important to God, because most of the Bible is just that, law. And where there is law, there must be lawyers and judges. This passage from Exodus 18 is interesting. The next day Moses was settling disputes among the people, and he was kept busy from morning till night. When Jethro saw everything that Moses had to do, he asked, "What is all this that you're doing for the people? Why are you doing all this alone, with people standing here from morning till night to consult you?" Moses answered, I must do this because the people come to me to learn God's will. When two people have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide which of them is right, and I tell them God's laws and commands. Then Jethro said, You're not doing this right. You'll wear yourself out and these people as well. This is too much for you to do alone. Now, let me give you some good advice. You should choose some capable men and appoint them as leaders of the people. They must be God-fearing men who can be trusted and who cannot be bribed. Let them serve as judges for the people on a permanent basis. They can bring all the difficult cases to you, but they can decide themselves on the smaller matters. If you do this, as God commands, you will not wear yourself out, and all these people can go home with their disputes settled. Ultimately, as a barrister, my vocation is to help people understand their rights and resolve their disputes. Lawyers can do a disservice to their clients by stoking the fires of a dispute or by allowing it to drift along aimlessly. As a Christian, I try to focus on dispute resolution. All cases should be brought to a satisfactory conclusion as swiftly as possible, ideally out of court. Many people assume that it must be hard to be a Christian barrister because we must accept cases, regardless, as the Code of Conduct says, of the opinion we may have formed of the character, reputation, cause, conduct, guilt, or innocence of the client. We're often not on the side of the angels, and our job is not to seek the truth as such, but to put our client's case as well as possible so that the judge can decide on the just outcome. But the Code of Conduct also stipulates that our overriding duty is to the court. We cannot plead anything which would mislead the judge, and we cannot coach our witnesses to give the right answers. You may have seen that on US legal dramas, but it's not permitted in the UK. Being a Christian motivates me to fulfill my duty to my clients and to the court in the interests of justice. So one of my favourite verses from Scripture is Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? Thank you very much for listening.
Well, it's great to hear from John there, and I don't know whether his story resonated with any of you. It's a great reminder, isn't it, to know that God cares about every single second of our lives, no matter what our career path, no matter whether we're in a high in life or in a low, God cares about it all. And I love testimony, I love hearing people's stories. So now just for a few moments, we're going to hear one of our own stories in the life of Trevor Goetcher and see the amazing news of how the last few years haven't been the easiest years for Trev, and yet God has drawn him close and enabled him to plough ahead with a heart full of thanks because of what he's done in Jesus. Over to Trevor.
Hi, my name's Trevor, and I'd like to tell you a bit about my journey with Jesus. I was brought up in a fairly Christian family as a young child. I was in the choir and attended church regularly, and I also was confirmed at quite a young age. And like every other young man, I suppose, I then went off a path and really forgot where God was. I've never really stayed completely out of touch, but I was never really turning myself to the Lord and asking him for support, and prayer really was never that close to me once I'd got to my teenage years. Anyway, as the years went on, obviously, I became a little bit more curious, but I think my turning point and full understanding of how Jesus and the Lord reaches out to you came probably about 3 or 4 years ago when I was experiencing quite a troublesome time in my life, and I had no idea where to go really. I didn't know what to do, where to turn to. So I was blessed to meet an elderly lady who wanted to attend church, so I took it upon myself to provide that service, taking her to church on a Sunday. And I found that attending that service each week was giving me a little bit of hope and strength. And the words from the Bible that were read in the readings and the sermons were really touching a part of me which I'd never really thought about before. Anyway, things really became quite challenging for me in 2018, to the point that I was not particularly well, strong mentally. And I think that I had to make a decision in my life, and I took that decision. But I know that without having the hand of God with me, holding me as I took that leap of faith, I never would have made that decision. And frankly, I don't know where I'd have been if I hadn't. What I do know is that as I take Jesus into my heart more daily, I feel better. I know that my life now is certainly in a better place than it had been. And so all I would say is that for anyone who's facing difficult times is just maybe take a time to take some solace with Jesus, attend a church, sit in the back if you're not that bothered, and and just see where it takes you. There's another point before I'd like to close, that over the last few years the churches have been doing vigils of prayers and stuff, and on that first year when I was facing such a challenge, I took the turn of doing an hour in the early hours of the morning to pray. And I found, as I opened the book of Psalms, this psalm here, Psalm 31, and I'll read just from the first thing. In you, Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. The psalm goes on. It's actually quite an inspiring one. I found it one of strength and hope. And it was really quite surreal that I opened that book to that page at that time, and it was exactly what I needed. So I hope that this is of some inspiration to you all. God bless. Amen.
Great, well it's awesome to hear from Trevor there. Moving on in our men's breakfast, I thought it would be good to do something different, and we're still kind of in full-on lockdown mode, and it's very good to stay healthy. I know Joe Wicks has gone viral, so I thought we'd be thinking about keeping a healthy mind and a healthy body during lockdown. And I'm going to be focusing on the body, and then in a few moments' time we're going to be heading over to Roger Brockway and thinking about healthy mind. But with regards to healthy body, we read in 1 Timothy 4 verse 8, physical training's of some value, but godliness is a value for eternity. And so we can't forget the godliness part. We've had the talk, we've had the testimony, but physical training is still of some value. And some of you will know this missionary called Jim Elliot. He put it like this, and I think it's just brilliant how he put it. And bearing in mind, he gave up his life in sharing the gospel with a tribe that had never had contact with outside civilization in the Amazon. Anyway, he said these words, I wrestle, he was a great wrestler, I wrestle solely for the strength and coordination of muscle tone that the body receives while working out, with the ultimate end of presenting a more useful body as a living sacrifice. Kept a healthy body for the sake of God. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you a few exercises to stay fit, and you might think because we have our men's breakfast at a pub, I'm just going to teach you this exercise. We're not going there. I'm going to do 2 different forms of exercise. One for the ultra fit who really want to push themselves, and another one for those who simply want to stay, supple. Maybe for the older folk who have less mobility. We're going to think about our bottoms, our trunks, and our tops. So firstly, this is 20 seconds in your day, 30 seconds in your day. Any space in the kitchen, just want you to lift your knees. This is a whole body workout really, but you're getting your bottom going. Your glutes are flexing as you lift your knees high, and you want to keep this going for about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, just gets the heart rate going. That's the bottom. Then for your core, for your trunk, I want you to find a seat These seats aren't that great because they're swivelly, but with a nice straight upright back, I just want you to try and twist your body. Maybe we want to do the old Russian hold there, back to the centre, and twist the other way. You're just getting your core going. And again, 20 seconds. Then we come up to the top, and we're just there and we're sparring. We all like this one. We're just sparring. Another 20, 30 seconds. And basically, folks, you just want to do this throughout the day. It's a great way of staying fit. But now, for those who are slightly more mobile, like to back themselves, we're going to head outside for this one. Okay, gents, so this first form of exercise is the slightly more intense exercise. It's called a bleep test. So you're going to be running backwards and forwards 20 metres each time, and the bleeps will progressively get faster and faster. It's an aerobic endurance exercise. And you do need 20 metres, so if you've got a big garden, space out 20 metres, or you can go and do it in the park, and then you just need to download the free bleep test app and press play like I'm going to press play now.
Fitness test
Start
will
slow,
start in
gets
5
faster.
seconds. Ready.
You ready?
Start level 1, 1. Level 1, 2. Level 10, 3. Level 10, 4. Level 11, 2. Level 11, 3. Level 11, 5.
11.5. That's to beat. As I said, it's a killer, but it only takes 13-14 minutes. Blessings. Okay, so that was hard work outside, but I hope those two different forms of exercise have inspired you. And I had to do something on exercise because, as you know, I sit on that body in the Church of England thinking about sports ministry. Anyway, that's the body, but now we're going to go over to Roger Brockway and think about how we can keep our minds active. And it's not just sitting at home doing crosswords and Sudokus. No, Roger's inspirational because during this time, he's become something of our parish poet. Over to Roger and he can explain more.
Good morning. Greg has asked me to say one or two words about the poems I've been writing during lockdown and to read you one. I've enjoyed this very much as a sort of escape from the potential boredom of lockdown. And I found that I've only written funny poems before, but the circumstances of lockdown and starting with the end of Lent and Easter led me to look into the Gospels and to find aspects of it which I could personalise and turn into a kind of poem. My angle has been to think about a particular scene from the Gospels and to think of it from the point of view of a particular character and then tell the story. And of course it's very easy in many ways because the story is already there in the Bible. I just have to give the angle of the person that I've decided to identify with and try and get inside their head and tell the story as I see it from their point of view. So the poem I'm going to read you is the one I've entitled Good Friday. And the others I've tended to give the name of a person to, but this one I decided that I wanted to see it from the angle of the character whose name we don't know, who we know of as the penitent thief, the one of the two thieves crucified alongside Jesus, who in fact turned to Jesus in the end and repented of his sins and asked Jesus to remember him. So I've invented the story, of course, the very beginning of it. I picture the position where the criminal who was about to be crucified, his last chance was probably to be released on the Passover, because as we all know, Pilate had this tradition that he released to the Jews somebody at the Passover, and it looked as if it was going to be this popular guy Barabbas, and my poor penitent thief didn't have a hope. But when suddenly Jesus appeared, this guy who we knew nothing about, who he calls this prophet guy when he first hears about him, he might be released instead of Barabbas. But this sort of opened the field. So this poor thief thought, well, this might give me a chance. Maybe it won't be Barabbas, it won't be Jesus, they'll go for a third guy. It just could be me. That was his last chance. So that's where I start the poem. And as I go through it, you'll find that I lead into very familiar territory, but you must see it from the point of view of the guy, this penitent thief. So, let me get on with it. This is my poem, Good Friday. Of course, we knew we never really had a chance. It was always going to be Barabbas. There was a glimmer of hope where the governor seemed to want to free this prophet guy, but the high priests put paid to that. Not him, or either of us, Barabbas. So to Golgotha it was, with our crosses on our backs, no hope, no second chance, just pain and death to come. But then, by chance, for one short second, my hand touched the prophet's foot, and a tingling in my body told me there was nothing more to fear. Pain just ceased to hurt me any more. My life had been a hard one, filled with loss and fear and hate, with very little room for love or anything of that sort. But as our crosses were raised up, that whole old world of hate seemed to shrink away before the power of this mysterious man, and in its place was something fresh, and love did radiate. The presence of the prophet just grew and grew and grew. I have very little understanding of good things like Messiah, but as the world faded, the space was filled by what? Can it really be true that this man beside me is the Son of God? I plucked up my courage and asked him then and there just to remember me. People speak of music, but I'd never heard it sound until I heard it then when he answered me and spoke and promised me paradise with him this very day. How has it come about that I, of all men, should end this life by hanging beside the Son of God when he comes into his glory? That I'll be heaven's guest forever and the envy of the earth, instead of dying in contempt and pain, the first to have rebirth.
Well, thanks so much, Roger. Really, really good to hear that poem. And I know that you've got plenty more up your sleeve. And I hope that's inspired you, if you are something of a creative writer, to use this time to think more imaginatively and maybe to glorify God in your poetry and writing skills. That's about it for today, folks. But before we properly finish, we're going to head over to the Gambia to see our brother Paul over there, who really, really wanted to be a part of our men's breakfast. And for the first time ever, he can be, because it's on cyberspace. And so Paul's going to have the last word. He's going to end with some African singing and joy, and a cup of tea as well, English style. So over to Paul. Bye!
I was really excited and overjoyed when Reverend Greg invited me to be a part of your online men's breakfast. You know, Reverend Greg was supposed to join me last month for us to launch the first ever men's breakfast here in the Gambia in Africa, but that couldn't work. His ticket was cancelled His trip couldn't work because of the coronavirus. What a shame. Oh, how I miss the English fry. I'm so excited to miss breakfast. That's my tea this morning. Great. I'm really glad to be a part of this. Maybe you're wondering about your faith in the Lord, or you're thinking, why Christianity? Or maybe you don't even believe. I'm telling you, life starts with God, life continues in God, life is sustained by God. So let's serve God in this pandemic and unprecedented time. God is real. You think we are all mistaken to serve God? You think we are all fools? No, we are in the right place. Folks, if you are hearing me, you are Alfold or Loxwood Parish, come to that church, meet Christ, and serve the Lord. I'm inviting you to serve Christ. I want to bless your heart this morning from a song that Greg and I used to sing with some old folks in a care home in London while I was with him. It's taken from Philippians 4 verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say rejoice. Rejoice, rejoice. And again I say rejoice. Rejoice, rejoice. And again I say rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say rejoice. God bless you. Don't give up. We might be locked down. We're all in our hidings. Our God is not in a lockdown. He's everywhere. He loves you and wants you and I to be with him. Let's come to Christ. Serve him. Bless you.